But I grew up as a vicar's kid, and as a typical vicar's kid, I hated anything to do with God. I found it utterly boring going to church. I was that typical vicar's kid that rebelled, that caused my parents absolute nightmares, and would regularly get utterly wasted and getting drunk, and my behaviour was quite a challenge to my mum and dad.
Hello and welcome to Faith in God Alone. And today I've got a special guest with me, and he's got to introduce himself, and we'll see how it goes.
Wonderful, thank you, Samson. Yeah, my name is Chris Duffet, and I just love being part of this. This is great.
It is. And, Chris has been an inspiration to me as well. You might not know it, but through that prophetic ministry and so on. But before getting there, how did you become a Christian?
That's a great question, Samson. So my dad was a vicar. He died a number of years ago now, but I grew up as a vicar's kid, and as a typical vicar's kid, I hated anything to do with God. I found it utterly boring going to church. I was that typical vicar's kid that rebelled, that caused my parents absolute nightmares, and would regularly get utterly wasted and getting drunk, and my behaviour was quite a challenge to my mum and dad. And I used to hang out a lot with my sister, and we used to really enjoy drinking. We used to spend a lot of time going to parties, and she met with God dramatically. And it was right before my eyes, I saw a changed life, and I knew that she wasn't making it up. That what I saw wasn't some kind of elaborate trying to pull the wool over my eyes kind of thing, but it was real. And then she said these words to me, Samson. She said, "Chris, Jesus died for you." And I thought that was absurd, because being a vicar's kid, I knew the story. I've been to so many church services, and I'd heard the story of Jesus dying for the world, but for me. And it was the for me bit that I couldn't get away from. And I kept thinking about it. And my girlfriend at the time, she said, "Hey, let's go along to this youth thing. It's at my local church." We went to this youth thing, and it was there that I wanted to, like, nothing could have stopped me. I wanted to become a Christian. And I knew that it would cost my life, that I would surrender the most important thing in my life, which was me. I was selfish. The way I treated people was so bad. But I met with Jesus, who gave his life for me. And I remember going up to the youth leader afterwards. I was 17 years old, and I was a bit of a lad. And I had tears streaming down my face, Samson. And I said, "Can I please become a Christian?" And he said, "Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, you can. The invitation is open to all." And he gave me a little booklet. He explained what I could do in praying and accepting Jesus into my life, and believing in faith what Jesus had done for me, that he had died for me, that he rose again for me, and that I would surrender my life to him. And that's what I did, age 17. And my goodness, my life changed. It utterly changed. Just in the quiet of my bedroom, I got on my knees and I said this prayer. And I'd love to say, wow, God walked into the room and I had a vision. But nothing happened. But there was a miracle that happened deep within me, in my heart. And I had a new life. The Bible describes it as being born again. And that's what happened to me. I was born again. I was born afresh. And I remember saying to my mum, "Mama, I've become a Christian." She was peeling carrots at the kitchen sink at the time. "Mum, I've become a Christian." She's like, that's wonderful. I said, yeah, it doesn't mean that we're still not going to fight, right? But that's the first thing that changed. That I stopped fighting. I stopped swearing at my parents. I stopped, and just slowly, just a new life started to emerge. And I found myself, I couldn't stop loving people. So I would share anything that I had with people who were homeless on the street. So I would sit and spend time with people on the streets. And I haven't looked back. That's what I've done for the last 30 plus years.
Wow.
Of doing what I do as an evangelist. It started right then.
Wow. What a wonderful experience. Yes. And as you talked about being an evangelist, how did your calling into ministry start?
Yeah, other people recognized it in me. I didn't even know what an evangelist was. I think I had some idea it was some Billy Graham type thing or speaking to large crowds. So as a brand new Christian, people would say to me, oh, you've got the gift of an evangelist. And I was thinking, what is that? And what I was just doing naturally was letting others in on what I had encountered as a follower of Jesus. And I started to do things out on the street. So some creative paintings on the street. I started juggling grapefruit. So this was in my first year at university. I remember I would go on the streets and I'd have these grapefruit and I'd say, come and gather around, ladies and gentlemen, I've got some good news to share. And I'd just be juggling grapefruit. I mean, I look back now and I think, what was I doing?
So did you feel like the Holy Spirit was leading you to do this?
Oh, I had such a hunger to let others know. And what I couldn't understand was why people couldn't know or wouldn't know, and why Christians around me wouldn't tell people who didn't have a clue about Jesus about him. For me, it was like, oh, I've got it. I'd been brought up with it, but it had never become something
reality.
Utter, the reality of it, that God is real. This is true. This is, there really is a living God, and he's given his very best for me. That Jesus was given for me. And I couldn't get my head around, why aren't people getting this? Why aren't these Christians also telling people about it? For me, it just felt like the normal thing to do, the most important thing to do. So I would drag people out on the streets, including my wife, who we weren't married at the time, but we met when we were kids. We're 18 years old.
Wow.
She would come out on the streets with me, terrified, what's going to happen? But we met all kinds of people. So I just carried on doing that. Worked for a local Baptist church. Set up youth projects. Worked like a madman in anything I could do. Yeah, I'm there. Just the enthusiasm.
You were like a man of a mission.
Totally a man with a mission, with a belief that the gospel works.
Yes.
I know we know it, and perhaps you're listening to this as a follower of Jesus, but I want to remind you, if you're listening, the gospel isn't broken. The gospel works. The gospel changes lives. The good news of what Jesus has done changes people's lives, changed my life. The people around me that I share the good news of Jesus with, their lives have been changed. I just think of this place where we're at, this cafe. One of our volunteers, he came along to an Alpha course. Every second word was the F word. And he said, I'm only here for 1 week. I don't even want to be here, but I've come along. That was 2.5 years ago. He's come every week since to be part of something that's going on here. He's a man in his 80s.
Oh, wow.
He said, why didn't anyone tell me this earlier? He's a changed man. The gospel works. It changes people's lives, gives hope. And that's what I wanted to do. And you're right, a man with a mission worked for a Baptist church as a community worker. And in that process, called to Baptist ministry. But I knew it wasn't as a pastor or a teacher. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love, teaching, and I do a lot of teaching and was doing a little bit then. But I knew that it was on this call for being an evangelist
Yes.
and being amongst people who had yet to encounter the good news of Jesus. And in that time, my life was completely changed, Samson. So I was just longing to bring the gospel. But I met a friend of mine out on the streets, a hopeless drug addict, a heroin addict called Simon. And I met him, and I honestly thought he was going to die in front of my eyes. He had taken a bad hit of heroin. There were horrible stories. I'd been to some funerals of young men who had overdosed. And this guy looked like he was going to die. This was before being able to phone, quick phone for an ambulance, We're down by the canal up in Chester. And I didn't know what to do for my friend. And I put my hand on his shoulder like this. And I prayed under my breath. No one could hear me. I prayed. And after 5 seconds or so, like that, he was instantly healed.
Wow.
The effects of the bad hit of heroin, healed. His heroin addiction, healed.
Wow.
And he said these words to me. He said, "That's it, Chris. The hand of God."
Wow.
So I had my hand on him, praying for him like that. And it changed my life. It changed his life.
Yes.
He wanted to know what had happened. How could God have healed him in that moment? But it changed my life because I realized that what God does is far better than what I can do.
Yes.
And I need to get in with that.
Yes.
So since that moment, many, many years ago, I've been praying for miracles, praying for people, for healing, hopeless situations in people's lives, just asking God to come and heal people, and regularly do that out on the streets.
Yes, because people will say, some people tend to say that miracles are not happening nowadays, but you see miracles.
Yeah, miracles. I believe miracles aren't happening today because we don't expect or ask or pray for miracles to happen. A couple of weeks ago, I went out on the streets to pray for people for healing. I took my daughter with me, and we just spent a couple of hours just offering to pray for people. And people were really moved at the offer. Wow. They were really moved that we would be there to pray for people and to remind them that there really is a God. And I worked out something. I need to go to the people that I don't want to go to.
Yes.
So this Sunday morning, there were groups of lads that were still hungover, still drunk from the night before. There were people who'd come from an all-night rave. There were groups of people that I distinctly thought, oh no, I don't want to go up to them. So I did. I thought, no, I need to, because they need what I've got.
Yes.
So prayed for people. I had a word of knowledge for someone for their hand. They were really freaked out. They were like, how did you know that? They had a bad cut on their hand, and I offered to pray for them. So I don't think I would have seen any miracles if I'd spent a couple of hours doing nothing. But intentionally seeking a couple of hours, going to go and pray for people for healing. Miracles can happen. I'd love to say they happen all the time.
Yes.
Every 5 minutes, but they don't. But the more I ask and the more I seek, the more I'm intentionally looking out to pray for people, the more I see it happen.
That's wonderful, isn't it? If you have just joined us, you are following, or you are watching, not following, you're watching Faith in God's Alone. And today my guest is my brother, Chris Duffet. He's a Baptist minister, he's an evangelist, he's an artist, he's you name it. And thank you very so much.
Thank you, Samson.
All right, take care. See you next time.